At 8:15 a.m. on the 6th of August 1945, during the early morning rush hour, the operator of the Japan Broadcasting Corporation in Tokyo detected that the Hiroshima radio station had suddenly gone off air. At the same moment, the Tokyo Railroad Telegraph Exchange also realized that the main line telegraph system connecting Hiroshima had stopped working. From 8:15 a.m. onwards, military bases throughout Japan repeatedly tried to contact the Imperial Army Control Station in Hiroshima. But they too were met with complete and utter silence. However, the eerie quiet was soon broken by a flood of unofficial reports from passengers on trains departing from railway stations north of Hiroshima. The terrified witnesses all spoke of a colossal explosion to the south, coupled with a blinding flash of light, intense heat, a loud roar, and a shockwave on an unimaginable scale. These reports were quickly transmitted to the headquarters of the Imperial Japanese Army. The General Staff were baffled by this ominous development. There had been no large-scale air raid. Nonetheless, the evidence was that following a single massive explosion, Hiroshima was apparently now a ghost city. This is the harrowing saga of how the unnecessary obstinacy and procrastination by the Japanese Supreme Council for the Direction of War over a period of 10 crucial days in July and August 1945 triggered President Truman's decision to drop the first atomic bomb on Japan.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, and their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war.
Japan is all too often perceived as the surprise victim of an unforeseen and unpredictable atomic weapon. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. And in order to understand the saga of the atomic bomb in its true historical context, it's vitally important to understand the fact that during World War II, Japan had its own equivalent of the Manhattan Project. The truth is that both sides of the conflict were engaged in a frantic race to develop the atom bomb. Yoshio Nishina was Japan's top nuclear physicist. He was the man in charge of Japan's main atomic development program. The project was controlled by the Japanese army and was codenamed Nigo, designated by the first two letters of Nishina's surname. The day after the explosion, Nishina was ordered to fly to Hiroshima and report back. As his plane circled the doomed city, Nishina was instantly aware that Hiroshima had been destroyed by an atomic bomb.
By 1945, both sides in the Pacific War harboured the justifiable fear that their adversaries would unlock the secrets of uranium-235 production, which would allow their opponents to develop the unimaginable power of an atomic bomb. The challenge for both sides was how to produce this incredibly rare resource in sufficient quantities to power even a single atomic bomb. Thanks to the famous Manhattan Project, that desperate race was won by the US.
Three different cameras recorded from 6 miles away these views of the most concentrated release of explosive energy in the history of mankind.
It is sobering and heartbreaking to realize that were it not for the strict adherence to the concept of Bushido by those 6 men who controlled wartime Japan, the use of the 2 atomic bombs in August 1945 against Japanese cities could and should have been averted. Looming over the whole tragic saga is the cold, disconsolate truth of one dreadful fact. Were it not for the delays caused by hidebound adherence to the arcane Bushido Code of Honor and the national cult of emperor worship, which bound and governed the ruling classes of Japan, the atom bombs need never have been dropped at all. Enola Gay was the aircraft which dropped the first atomic bomb over a Japanese city. The terrifying explosive energy unleashed in the bomb detonated over Hiroshima was contained in just 140 pounds of uranium.
The bomb was finally released exactly at the designated hour, and the explosion occurred as planned.
Enola Gay stayed over the target area for just 2 minutes, dropped the bomb, and then turned for home. She was already 10 miles away when the bomb detonated, and about 15 miles away before the crew felt the shock waves from the blast.
At 8:15 in the morning of August 6, Japanese time, the first atomic bomb struck an enemy target. This is 0 point on Hiroshima, the exact spot above the city at which the bomb burst over enemy territory, at the junction of the Matoyusu and Oto rivers.
At the moment of detonation, the temperature within the fireball at the heart of the atomic explosion instantaneously reached to over 1 million degrees centigrade. Such temperatures are normally found only at the sun's core. The fireball created by the chain reaction expanded rapidly and reached a diameter of 300 yards within just 1 second. On the ground below the blast, the heat energy emitted from the fireball instantly raised ground temperatures near the epicenter to 4,000 degrees centigrade. This intense heat turned sand into glass. The heat immediately caused devastating fires, which contributed to the widespread destruction in the city well beyond the epicenter of the explosion, with fires spreading over 11 square miles.
The shell-shocked survivors on the ground reported experiencing a brilliant flash of light, followed by a long, drawn-out, loud booming sound, a shock wave, and a blast of intense heat. As those stunned survivors emerged from the ruins on the edge of the blast, they saw that the entire city of Hiroshima had been destroyed simultaneously.
The devastation you see here was caused by the explosion of the bomb above this 0 point. Only the strongest buildings are left standing, and they are gutted. Looking north from 0 point, this is what was left. Looking east, the camera records a scene of complete devastation in the immediate area. To the south, these are the ruins. Looking west from 0 point, the same complete leveling is evident, the same inability of structures to withstand atomic power.
President Harry Truman was the first voice to break the news to the world.
With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
These immense forces are released by splitting the nucleus of an atom. During fission, some of the mass is converted into particles known as neutrons. The rest of the mass is converted to a relatively huge amount of energy, which radiates outwards at the speed of light.
That radiant energy takes 4 main forms. Firstly, it manifests itself in the form of an intense flash of light, so bright it will blind anyone looking directly at the explosion. A nanosecond later comes a wave of intense heat, so intense it will instantly vaporize the human body and cause horrible burns to those who are further away. This excoriating heat is followed by a massive outburst of kinetic energy in the form of a blast wave which destroys all structures in its path. Finally comes the deadly radioactive fallout, which will cause a lingering death to its victims.
On the 6th of August 1945, it was not just Japanese citizens who were present in the vicinity of Hiroshima. The nuclear explosion was witnessed at first hand by Father John Zemus, a German Jesuit priest who was employed as a professor of modern philosophy at Tokyo's Catholic University.
Between 0 point and the main building of the novitiate of Jesuits 4 miles away was a hill which served to lessen the intensity of the blast. Yet despite this protection, all the windows were shattered and part of the wall blown in. The chapel, which is the left wing of the building, is built of timber with plaster walls. The glass in the doors of the main entrance foyer were shattered, and the paneled ceiling was blown loose by the force of the explosion occurring 4 miles away.
Father, would you introduce yourself, please?
I am Father John Zemus, Professor of Philosophy at the Catholic University of Tokyo, which is under management of Jesuit fathers.
What were you doing in Hiroshima at the time of the explosion?
Well, my philosophical class was evacuated from Tokyo to Hiroshima about 5 months ago, and I was staying with my class at a house of studies at the outskirts of the city of Hiroshima.
Could you describe exactly what happened in the morning of August the 6th?
I was in my room, which faces the valley, and suddenly I saw a light, like magnesium light, flashlight, which filled the whole valley. And looking out of my window to find out the reason for this peculiar phenomena, I saw nothing besides this light, and turning from the window to the door of my room, I heard a crash. It may have been 10 seconds, after seeing the light, the flashlight. And immediately I was covered with splinters of the window frames and glass sticking into the walls and actually in my flesh itself. I tried to get out of my room, but found that our house had been severely damaged by the blast of this explosion. I had the impression at that time that the bomb had immediately crashed on our house. So severe, so strong was the effect of the percussion. But looking outside the house, I saw no trace of the bomb itself, but about a kilometer away from our houses, I saw several peasant houses which were on fire. After a while, we saw a procession of people coming from the outskirts of the city up the valley. Many of them, most of them, were wounded, especially the parts of the body which were not covered by clothes, like hands, feet, back. They came up to our house and we did what we could, but there were no possibility to give much of aid. As a matter of fact, we used all our grease we had at that wartime in the house, and it was exhausted in a moment.
How many people do you think were killed?
All of us who lived through this experience at the spot estimate the numbers of dead at least at 100,000.
In order to comprehend the factors which shaped the seemingly irrational decision to continue the war in the face of the first atomic bomb, it's necessary to journey into the Japanese national psyche as it was in 1945. During World War II, Japanese society was highly ordered and homogeneous. The Emperor Hirohito was the central figure in Japanese national ideology. Hirohito was revered by his subjects as a living god descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu. Emperor worship was a complex phenomenon that involved a blend of Shinto beliefs, nationalistic sentiments, and a fair bit of political manipulation. In Japan, the all-pervading belief of the emperor's divinity was the powerful inspiration for extreme patriotism and sacrifice. Divine provenance was evidenced by the fact that for 2,000 years Japan had been undefeated in war, and victory was perceived as the inevitable outcome of any military endeavour.
However, by the summer of 1945, Japan had suffered a never-ending string of military defeats, which were intractable evidence of Japan's impending defeat.
There is a compelling argument that the decision to use the atom bomb was the inevitable consequence of the obstinacy of the 6 Japanese men who constituted the Supreme Council for the direction of war. And it was their failure to face up to the reality that Japan was on the brink of defeat which led to the atom bomb being unleashed. The Big Six, as they were known, constituted the 6 key figures responsible for making major wartime decisions in Japan. This council included the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of War, the Minister of the Navy, the Chief of the Army General Staff, and the Chief of the Navy General Staff.
Ketsu-go, which translates as Operation Decisive, was the Japanese High Command's plan for the fanatical defence of the Japanese home islands. The primary goal of Ketsu-go was to inflict heavy casualties on the Allied forces, aiming to break the American will to continue the war and secure an honourable negotiated settlement, rather than suffer the dishonour entailed in an unconditional surrender. Operation Ketsu-go involved the mobilisation of nearly 3 million men. The focus was on a fierce defence on the ground, particularly on Kyushu. The plan was to stall the Allied forces with a massive defensive effort, causing such heavy losses that the Americans would be forced to negotiate a peace. The Allies realised the bitter reality. It was now almost a certainty that a prolonged and bloody invasion of Japan would be necessary.
There can be no peace in the world until the military power of Japan is destroyed, with the same completeness as was the power of the European dictators. To do that, we are now engaged in a process of deploying millions of our armed forces against Japan in a mass movement of troops and supplies and weapons over 14,000 miles, a military and naval feat unequaled in all history. Substantial portions of Japan's key industrial centers have been leveled to the ground in a series of record incendiary raids. What has already happened to Tokyo will happen to every Japanese city whose industries feed the Japanese war machine. If the Japanese insist on continuing resistance beyond the point of reason, their country will suffer the same destruction as Germany. Our blows will destroy their whole modern industrial plant and organization, which they have built up during the past century and which they are now devoting to a hopeless cause. We have no desire or intention to destroy or enslave the Japanese people, but only surrender can prevent the kind of ruin which they have seen come to Germany as a result of continued useless resistance.
On the 26th of July 1945, the Allied powers issued the Potsdam Declaration, which, in the light of Japan's hopeless military situation, demanded the complete and unconditional surrender of Japanese imperial forces, or face the prompt and utter destruction of Japan. Despite their vanishing hopes of victory, the Japanese government ignored the Potsdam Ultimatum. The resulting order to unleash the atomic bomb resulted in immediate immolations, injuries, mutilations, and lingering deaths from radiation sickness among over 500,000 Japanese men, women, and children. The appalling reality is that by that late stage of the war, all of those casualties were completely avoidable.
It was to spare the Japanese people from utter destruction that the ultimatum of July the 26th was issued at Potsdam. Their leaders promptly rejected that ultimatum. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. Behind this air attack will follow sea and land forces in such numbers and power as they have not yet seen, and with the fighting skill of which they are already well aware.
The crucial fact is that on 26th of July 1945, 11 days before the first atom bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Emperor Hirohito considered the Potsdam Declaration and immediately accepted the necessity of consenting to the Allied demand for the unconditional surrender of the Japanese Imperial Army. The bleak and distressing truth is that it actually required the surprise Soviet invasion of Japanese Manchuria on the 8th of August 1945, coupled with the second atom bomb, which was detonated over Nagasaki on the 9th of August, to force the Supreme Council for the Direction of War, who on 10th of August 1945 finally accept the need for the surrender of Japan.
At 10:58 the morning of August 9th, Japanese time, the second atomic bomb was exploded over the industrial seaport city of Nagasaki. Almost the entire population of 230,000 people was engaged in the manufacture of arms, munitions, and other war products. In an area of a little more than 3 square miles, there was very severe damage by blast and fire. Most buildings were reduced to rubble. Still recognizable from the air are the skeleton remainders of the Mitsubishi plants, the large steel and arms works, and the ordnance factory devoted to the manufacture of torpedoes.
The rationale behind Japan's decision to ignore the Potsdam ultimatum was in large part due to adherence to the Bushido Code, meaning the way of the warrior. Bushido enshrined the samurai heritage of Japan, and it was a key element in shaping the Japanese military mindset and actions. Bushido encapsulated a code of honour and loyalty, resulting in a willingness to die for the emperor, for country, and for family. Bushido emphasised unquestioning loyalty to the emperor, to superiors, and to one's comrades. This instilled a culture of obedience and an extreme reluctance to disobey orders.
By the 1930s, the underlying principles of nuclear fission, which powered an atomic bomb, were well known and understood by nuclear physicists throughout the world. The development of the atomic bomb, which took so many lives, stemmed from the work of Albert Einstein, who in 1916 published his famous theory of relativity, which is encapsulated in the famous equation E equals mc squared. This famous idea posited the theory that the amount of energy released by splitting an atom was so vast it was almost beyond human comprehension. Einstein correctly postulated that as a result of nuclear fission, a microscopically small amount of mass is transformed into a relatively enormous amount of energy. The amount of energy is the mass of the atomic particle transformed into energy, multiplied by 186,000, multiplied then again by 186,000. Although Einstein himself played no part in the development of the atom bomb, events were to terrifyingly prove Einstein's theory to be correct. In the early summer of 1940, Yoshio Nishina met Lieutenant General Takeo Yasuda on a train. Nishina convinced Yasuda of the possibility of Japan building nuclear weapons. By late 1941, Nishina's nuclear research laboratory had over 100 researchers. The overriding problem for Project Nigu was to produce enough fissionable material to power an atomic bomb by separating fissionable uranium-235 atoms from uranium-238 atoms. Yoshio Nishina decided that this would be best achieved by the process of thermal diffusion. However, the difficulty of producing enough enriched uranium-235 to power an atomic bomb proved insurmountable and thwarted the Japanese development program.
In 1940, the MAUD Committee explored various means of uranium enrichment in order to produce fissionable uranium-235 for use in nuclear weapons. In March 1941, 15 months of research work in Britain culminated in the MAUD report, particularly the section entitled Use of Uranium for a Bomb. This confirmed both the feasibility and the necessity of an atomic bomb, and resulted in the British nuclear weapons project, which was codenamed Tube Alloys. The British atomic bomb program was subsumed into the subsequent Manhattan Project, which was therefore built on shared knowledge and research.
The roster included many of the recognized leaders in modern-day physics and technical specialists from all parts of the world not then under enemy control. Sir James Chadwick headed an array of top British physicists at Los Alamos, and this group made invaluable contributions to technique and design. Professor J.D. Cockcroft, first to split the lithium atom in 1932, was another British consultant who gave vast help. Niels Bohr, one of the modern giants in physical science, made himself available after his escape from Denmark via Sweden.
We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won. But the greatest marvel is not the size of the enterprise, its secrecy, or its cost, but the achievement of scientific brains in making it work. And hardly less marvelous has been the capacity of industry to design and of labor to operate the machines and methods to do things never done before. Both science and industry work together under the direction of the United States Army, which achieved a unique success in an amazingly short time. It is doubtful if such another combination could be got together in the world. What has been done is the greatest achievement of organized science in history.
The development of the atom bomb was a joint enterprise governed by the terms of the Quebec Agreement. In order to use the atomic bombs, the consent of the British government was required. This vital consent from Great Britain was duly obtained, and accordingly on the 25th of July 1945, orders were issued by General Thomas T. Handy of the US Army for atomic bombs to be used on 4 potential target cities: Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, and Nagasaki. These target cities were chosen as, although they were large urban areas, the civilian houses were intermixed with factories producing military weapons.
The presence of so much military production, cheek by jowl with civilian homes, was the justification on which the decision to drop the atom bomb on a city was based. It's appalling to comprehend the fact, but Hiroshima and Nagasaki could both have been saved. However, as we know, for 15 crucial days, Hirohito's well-informed decision to surrender was really the only option. However, that eminent and perfectly sensible course of action was blocked by arguments, protocol, and procrastination among the 6 members of the Japanese Supreme Council for the Direction of War. And in that time, 500,000 Japanese civilians were doomed to die a horrible death or mutilation in the fireball and shockwave caused by the detonation of 2 atomic bombs. But in the light of the huge American casualties incurred in capturing Okinawa, The Allies were naturally reluctant to commence an invasion of Japan, which would inevitably result in the death of hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, sailors, and airmen.
On the 14th of August 1945, NHK sound technicians went to the Imperial Palace to record Emperor Hirohito's surrender speech, which is known to posterity as Gyuku on Hoso, which translates to dual voice. The Emperor's dual voice speech of surrender was broadcast on the 15th of August 1945, 6 days after the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. During his speech, the Emperor explained that one of the main reasons for the decision to surrender unconditionally was the atomic bomb.
The enemy has begun to employ a new and most cruel bomb, the power of which to do damage is indeed incalculable, taking the toll of many innocent lives. Should we continue to fight, not only would it result in an ultimate collapse and obliteration of the Japanese nation, but also it would lead to the total extinction of human civilization.
Unbelievably, despite the unequivocal acceptance by the Emperor, there were still hardline Japanese army fanatics who disagreed with the decision to surrender unconditionally. On the 14th of August 1945, under the leadership of Major Kenji Hatanaka, Japanese army hardliners staged the Kyūjū Jiken, the all too often overlooked military coup d'etat, which was centred on the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. The immediate purpose of the Kyūjū Jiken was to prevent NHK from broadcasting a recording of the Emperor Hirohito announcing the surrender of Japan. This was a last-ditch effort by hardline military officials to prevent Japan's unconditional surrender to the Allied powers. By seizing and destroying the recording of the Emperor's surrender announcement, Major Kenji Hatanaka hoped to kindle a revolt in the army sufficient to continue the war, even in the light of the atom bomb. Despite seizing the palace, the Kyūjū Jiken failed. The phonograph of the recording was smuggled out, and it was broadcast to the Japanese nation on the 15th of August 1945.
Transports from Okinawa swarmed onto Atsugi Airfield to prepare for the arrival of the Supreme Allied Commander. Wrecked jet planes littered the battered field. The Japanese labor cleared away the debris. Atsugi was American manned and ready when the C-54 arrived, bearing the man who was to direct the future destiny of Japan. Bataan was remembered, and avenged. MacArthur moved to his next great role aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Here on the morning of September 2nd, the drama of surrender reached its climax. In a ceremony that lasted only 20 minutes, the fate of Japan was sealed forever. The 11-man Japanese delegation was photographed by cameramen, perched at every vantage point to record the momentous event for posterity. The stage was set. General MacArthur walked from a cabin to open the surrender ceremonies.
We are gathered here, representatives of the major warring powers, to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
On behalf of Emperor Hirohito, Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signed for the Japanese government. Japan accepted unconditional surrender according to the provisions of the Potsdam Declaration.
The Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers will now sign on behalf of all the nations at war with Japan. Will General Wainwright and General Percival step forward and accompany me while I sign?
General Jonathan Wainwright, liberated hero of Corregidor, and British General Arthur Percival, who was forced to surrender Singapore, stood at attention behind MacArthur as he began to write his name. The second pen was handed to General Percival. The third and fourth were earmarked for the National Archives and West Point. The fifth, Mac kept for himself.
These proceedings are closed.
The main drama of surrender was over. Now, throughout the Japanese Empire, in 5 designated surrender regions, the field armies of Japan laid down their guns. All enemy forces in China yielded to Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. Those in Manchuria and Northern Korea to the Soviets. In the Burma theater, East Indies and Southwest Pacific, they gave up to Admiral Mountbatten and the Australian command. Admiral Nimitz took the surrender in the Central Pacific.
In the wake of the Japanese surrender, Yoshio Nishina, under the watchful eye of the US Army, was ordered to deconstruct the remaining machinery which had been used by the Japanese atomic project NIGO. Japan's Manhattan Project was finally at an end. After the war, there were many who argued from the heart that the tragic human cost of Hiroshima and Nagasaki outweighed the potential loss of millions of American and Japanese lives, which would inevitably have resulted from Operation Downfall, the full-scale invasion of the Japanese home islands. However, President Truman was not one of them. The man who, in conjunction with Winston Churchill, took the decision to drop the 2 atom bombs on Japanese cities, felt no remorse whatsoever. He was resolute in his belief that unleashing the atom bomb was an unavoidable and necessary evil. President Truman dismissed all of those who opposed his own view as crybabies.
I don't care what they say about me. They've said everything under the sun. But I've always come to the conclusion that the old saying that nobody throws a stick at an empty fruit tree. Now, there are a lot of crybabies around who are talking about what ought to have done, and Obama ought to have had a demonstration in Japan before he killed all those people. But I had the authority of the best man in the business, and that was Henry L. Stimson, that the only operation that the Japanese would understand would be one that would show them what it was, and that's what happened. And it stopped the war. I don't care what the crybabies say now, because they didn't have to make the decision.